Making a garden is a constant process of evolution, experimentation, and problem solving. And after 11 years in our cottage garden here, we've made a few mistakes and lived to tell the tale. Welcome back to Garden Studio. I'm Tessa Pinner, a designer and gardener in upstate South Carolina, Zone 8A. In today's video, I want to take you on a little tour of our cottage garden, but a different kind this time, of all of the things that we did wrong and had to fix, or things that we just wish we had done differently from the beginning, in the categories of planting, systems, and infrastructure. Hopefully, this can give you a few ideas or save you a little bit of trouble and time in your own garden. You can see here I actually made a list because I thought, I'll just make a list of all the things, and then I had so many, I knew I would never remember them. So come with me, we're starting with plants, and the first really big example is Chinese mulberry. And when we first arrived, we literally put a fence around the thicket of thorny seedlings, and the mistake was just not going to battle from day one, because it has taken us a decade to fight them back to where we only have a few popping up here and there. If you move to a property, a new garden, take inventory of anything that might be invasive and start tackling it immediately. It will only get harder if you wait. When we first moved to this house, this area did not have a garden in it. It was a bad patch of poor grass and mostly weeds. And when we were trying to amend the soil for the first time, we got some manure from a horse farm. And what we didn't realize is that we probably should have aged that manure a little further, because we ended up with a host of pasture weeds in the garden simply because the horses were eating the plants in the pasture and those seeds ended up in our garden. One of the pasture weeds that we ended up with, I just spotted it. It had evaded my last round of weeding, hogweed right here. And you can't easily even pull it by hand because of these thorns. So you have to go in with a pair of gloves. So a very strong lesson that I learned from that was just to really know your source if you're getting a manure-based compost. And even when we started composting here, I was composting everything and realized, if we're not really sterilizing, we're going to have, again, from our own sources, but we're going to have weed seeds coming right back into the garden that we thought we had gotten rid of. So now what we do is we give the weeds to the chickens, or the really bad weeds, we actually do have the county take away, and we only compost material that we know isn't going to be recontributing weeds to the garden. Another point in this garden that I wish I had thought about, this main turf grass here is warm season grass, and that is a creeping stoloniferous, which means it's a basically little finger of grass that goes out with a stem and it roots, a stem and it roots. So what that means is that it crawls everywhere. So if you are not careful, it will come in every little gap and window that you give it. What you can do if you are starting a bed like this that you want to not have grass in it, you can dig down and actually put your edging material in concrete. We did not do that. So the alternative is you cut a really hard line with a weed eater and make sure you are cutting that grass down to dirt every week so that it doesn't have a chance to creep in like it is here. Because as a gardener, I end up doing a whole lot of this and weeding grass out of the beds. And now I look for it and I watch it and I keep it at bay, but it's the kind of thing that if you let go, it becomes kind of the monster coming in the back door. So really tight bed edging. It's one of those things that it's just, if you do it right, you don't think about it. And if you do it wrong, you spend so much time you don't need to spend just undoing what never should have happened in the first place, grass in your beds. This whole garage wall behind me used to be giant Chinese hollies. up past the gutter and up way out into the middle of this sidewalk. And one thing we did was just try to prune them to keep them out of the way before we realized, why are we trying to save these? These are just the wrong plant for this spot. We need to take them out. So we wrapped a chain. Well, my husband wrapped a chain around the trunks, huge trunks, tied them to our Suburban's hitch and yanked them out that way and never looked back. It was absolutely the right decision. Such a pain to do, but we lived with it, trying to force something to work that simply was the wrong plant in this spot. And when we removed it, things got a whole lot better. Here we are at the gate to the kitchen garden. One thing that I think it can be hard to do when you move into a new space is to just let go of the things that are there and realize it's not going to work. You just have to change it. And one good example of that for us in here was this corner that is all brick and covered with creeping fig now was English ivy when we arrived. It was all green, similar effect, which we loved, but it was very aggressive. It's not good for masonry. It was climbing actually into the windows and just overall making a big mess of things. And we tried pruning it, keeping it in check. Kind of same story as with the Chinese hollies, where we thought maybe we don't have to do the hard thing and actually get rid of this. When really the right thing was, nope, it's better to go backwards to get rid of something that shouldn't be there and to start over. And you can always replant. You can always start again with something that's going to be a better fit for your space if what you have now in the planting category isn't working. So it did take a couple of years to get this beautiful coverage with the creeping fig, but in time, so much better than the English ivy. When we first moved here as well, there were some giant Camellia Japonicas that were a hedge in front of this window, so tall, they had grown up almost to the top of the window to where when you looked out, it was like looking into just a wall of dark green. And we tried pruning them, and all that happened was that they got longer legs. If you can imagine kind of a Dr. Seuss, like this, the trunks, and then the green part on top got littler and littler and littler, and they ended up looking so goofy, and they just really needed to come out. But we could have saved ourselves just a little bit of work, honestly, by realizing those aren't in the right place. Just bite the bullet. Yes, they bloom beautifully. Plant them somewhere else where they belong and get them out of here. Moving on from planting to the category of infrastructure, these wooden raised beds have been in place for 4 seasons now. They are untreated wood that we actually treated ourselves with an eco stain because we could not just justify the idea of using treated wood. Everybody has a different opinion on that, but you cannot deny that if you use untreated wood, it is going to rot more quickly. So just in the realm of things we wish we could have done, quote, right the first time, would be, if you have a choice, definitely building your beds out of cedar would be the very best option, because you're not dealing with a stain that needs to be redone or can only do so much good. You're not having to repaint. You're actually harnessing the anti-rot properties of the wood itself. So something that we would do again or do the next time would be building this same profile of beds out of a more resistant wood. I've talked a lot about removing things so far, things that didn't belong, invasives, replacing things, but one thing that we did add entirely when we came to this property was fences. We did the front facing in wood, and then anything around the perimeter, we did either privacy fence or wire fence if it wasn't going to be visible. But as we lived here, over time, we realized, you know what? I really wish, and to this day, I still wish this, that we had actually fenced the front yard in as well. So that's not something that's done super often. In the US, I feel it's a little more common in other countries to have a front yard that's fenced. But what we found is that this is the nicest grass, the friendliest kid area, and you just don't feel as cozy and enclosed without a front yard fence. It wouldn't be right for everybody, but I would say don't dismiss it if you don't have an HOA restriction against it, because once we had kids, this is where they wanted to be. When we had dogs, there was always dog business to avoid in the back, and you just didn't have to do that. Didn't have to worry about that out here in the front. So if I had it to do again, I would definitely fence this front yard with that same kind of horse fence and just incorporate it into the cozy cottage garden design. The longer I garden, the more I think that the practical success of a garden is very largely down to its systems and having smart systems. So when we first got our chickens, we went through a couple of variations. This coop is designed to be fully mobile. So think pasture where it's in a different spot every day. We did that for a season, and it is a lot of work. So when we decided to make it more of a stationary coop, that's when the predators showed up. And what we realized last week, confirmed sighting a raccoon climbing up the outside of the coop, just when we had not had every bit of it buttoned down tight, we ended up losing chickens. So just really getting our coop security. If you have chickens, you probably have had dead chickens. I think that's the saying, right? Livestock, dead stock. So chickens managed to die pretty easily, including being tasty for everyone. So that was one system we really had to refine over time. Another thing when we first moved here is we had even more grass than we do now before we keep turning it into beds and meadows and gardens. And we did like everybody else, and we just bagged the grass and put it at the road. And now we don't bag the grass. If it's cut often enough, it doesn't have to be bagged. It could be left to recompost and add the nitrogen and the fertility back to the soil. So that's what we do now, and it's also less work. Another thing we didn't do at first when we came is all of these glorious trees that we have drop tons of leaves in the fall, and dutifully we gathered them all up, bagged those, put those by the road, when really that's free fertility that you're giving away. And then you have to bring fertility back in when you give up what you have. So what we do now is we gather the leaves and we put them in what we call our leaf hug. So that's really just a leaf compost, open compost bin right here that takes about two years, 2 seasons to break down. And over time, it's a perfect topping for all of the gardens, for the perennial gardens and for the kitchen gardens. This makes a beautiful, almost fine mulch that goes over top and just adds organic matter right back to the soil. When we first moved here, we did not realize that 2 of our boundaries have a lot of honeysuckle coming in from neighboring yards and properties. And when you first look at it, or to the non-gardener, you might think, oh, that is so charming, it's pretty, it's covering up the fence, it smells beautiful, the children love to sip the nectar from the flowers. All of those things are true. However, what we didn't realize is that it also goes along the ground and will pop up in the grass. So I would consider this actually a success and containment story once we realized that we didn't continue to let it invade. There is a sharp, again, down to dirt demarcation line. And if you mow and you mow right up to the edge, then you don't allow it to spread its little fingers into the grass and become a bigger problem. So since we wanted the longer grass areas in here, it would have been troubling to have lots of honeysuckle invading it. So we have managed to contain it along the edge, and then it's just one of those things that we know is here and we will be able to keep in check with this system. Thanks so much for watching. Gardening is a big experiment, and maybe you can learn from some of our mistakes. We've certainly made our fair share, and whatever you're facing in your own garden, it is all just part of a learning and growing experience. I hope you have a wonderful week in your own gardens. Happy gardening.